please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, today is August 27th, which is a big day for banks as well as borrowers. Now, the Reserve Bank's February 12th circular had said that all stressed loans of over 2,000 crores must be resolved in 6 months or taken to the bankruptcy court, that is, the NCLT. Now, the 6-month deadline ends today, and Ritu Singh is with us to tell us what's the list of those companies that are likely to be taken to the NCLT and which could have been resolved. Hey Ritu, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Well, you know, we'd reported that about 70 to 80 companies will fall under the purview of the Feb 12 circular. Now, the good news is that several of these have already been referred to NCLT, and there are a good 15 to 16 companies that banks are working on and are hopeful that they can resolve it outside of the NCLT procedure. So I could give you a whole list. We divide it into two parts, the power and the non-power sector, because power forms the bulk of this list. Almost 50% of the cases actually belong to the power sector. In that list, the cases that banks are trying to close before the deadline of 27th August is Avanta Jhabua Power, Coastal Energen, JP Power, Bina Nigri Plants, SKS Power, GMR Rajamundry, Prayagraj Power, KSK Mahanadi, as well as GMR Chhattisgarh. In several of these cases, they've identified buyers including Tata Power, Adani Power, Edelweiss, ARC, Singapore Agri Trade, and in some of them, they're looking for a long-term restructuring to ensure these cases are kept out of NCLT. There's another list where banks have decided that the best way for resolution will be to send them to NCLT. These include Jindal Indian Thermal Power, Ratan India, Sai Valdha Power, Shravanti Energy, Simhapur Energy, SR Gujarat, and Lavasa Corporation. In the among the 34 stressed lists that the Power Ministry had released, as per the Finance Ministry report that was submitted to the Parliament earlier this month, there are about 7 cases that, according to the Finance Ministry, is already in the resolved category. These include Adani Power, Adhunik Power, Damodar Valley, DB Power, Kanti Bijli, and GVK Industries. Now, this was as far as the power sector is concerned, where I said the bulk of the pain was. In the non-power sector also, there's a similar list where banks say they're trying to resolve some cases outside the NCLT process. Now, those names include Ballarpur Industries, Supreme Infra, Matex Fertilizers, Bombay Rayon, Hindustan National Gas, and Surat Hazira. A lot of these are listed companies as well, so good news for them. There are others that banks know they'll have to refer to NCLT because there is no other resolution outside that is possible. These include Punj Lloyd, JBF Industries, Garden Silk Mills, Rohit Ferrotech, ISMT, Gitanjali Gems, BMM Ispat, and Splendid Metal Products. This is a list that has been compiled as per our industry sources. This is by no way an exhaustive list. There could be more additions or deletions. We'd like to inform our viewers, but there's also some cases specifically that I'd like to mention that are grey areas. Take, for example, Reliance Communications. Now, this case clearly falls under the purview of the Feb 12 circular. It is a defaulter. It has loans of over 2,000 crores. But given that this case is already being heard at NCLAT, banks are unlikely to refer it to NCLT unless they get specific directions from the Reserve Bank of India, because they'll wait for the conclusion of that case before they decide what to do with Reliance Communications. There are a couple of other cases, Sterling Global, Urban Holdings, that are actually offshore companies, so they will not fall under the purview of Indian NCLT. So those also, for instance, will not be referred or taken action upon by banks. But this is so far what we've picked up. Of course, by the end of the day, we will be able to get you some more updates on whether or not these cases that banks are hoping to resolve have been resolved.
Okay, Ritu, thank you so much for breaking down that list and getting us the comprehensive names. A lot of interesting names in that particular list. But what is the impact of this circular and the deadline on the banking system? Now, Lata is here to explain us that. Lata, we already know the February 12th circular and the deadline. Do you see a lot of pressure on banks today on account of the deadline?
No, actually, I'm the harbinger of good news, if you please. I think it's not going to impact the banking system at all. There is no incremental NPA over here. All these were recognized and known for probably 3 years now. They used to be partly in the NPA list and partly in the standard but stressed list. Now, over the last 2 quarters, probably because of prodding of the Reserve Bank and the Feb 12 circular, all the standard but stressed have moved onto the NPA list. So this is not a new NPA accreting circular. This is just coming into fruition of a circular that already was there. There is no incremental bad news for the banking system. If anything, it is if they immediately file for NCLT and the case progresses and you get some value, at least liquidation value, then it's actually positive. It cleanses the system. So this should be seen as good for banks. Actually now the traffic jam that was there in the banks now moves to government and NCLT. RBI and banks are done with. Now it is the problem of IBC and the government. Well, just to point out about the two cases that Ritu referred to, besides Reliance Infocom, which I think in all probability will get until September 30th to be taken to NCLT because there is an NCLT order. Reliance Naval also is a very interesting case. It's over 2,000 crore and it has already been declared NPA. A bank in the March quarter itself, Union Bank and Vijaya Bank had declared it NPA. So it should be in this category. But yesterday we heard, or over the weekend, that Chairman Anil Ambani has resigned. So putting all this together, it looks like that should also be a logical case to be taken to NCLT.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much for that, Lata, as well as Ritu. Well, as we've already indicated, a large number of the stress loans of over 2,000 crores that face a threat of being taken to the NCLT are from the power sector. Now, the sector is expecting some kind of relief from the Allahabad High Court, which may give its judgment today in the power companies versus the Reserve Bank of India case. Lata, you've been telling us about this case. What do we expect? Today, we expect something?
Well, let me just go over a bit of what Ritu has already told you. 34 of the 70-odd cases are power cases. Of this, 8 involving 35,000 crore, the Finance Ministry claims are resolved. 10 projects are in the SBI Samadhan, and I will come to them in a minute. It's 81,000 crore cases. I'll come to them in a minute. 14 have been already admitted to NCLT, so that's 55,000 crores gone. And 2 accounts are in some kind of an SDR, some kind of a thing, an intermediate plan. And in all probability, that also will go to NCLT. That's another 10,000 crores. Let me just elaborate a little more on the Samadhan cases. There were 10. SBI now is saying they are serious only about 7. And then when we asked other bankers, have they signed up on what SBI has signed up, most of them said they have not yet signed up. So let us give it 50%. The SBI says it's a total of 70,000 crores for those 7 cases. Assuming that 40,000 crore gets resolved in that, if you look at the entire list, it's about 1.8 lakh crore cases, 34 cases. It looks like 1/3 will get resolved. I mean, if you count what SBI says in Samadhan, if you count what Finance Ministry says is already resolved, my calculation says that out of 1.8 lakh crore that's up for the NCLT, about 1/3 is done. Just a word more on Allahabad, for which you actually called me here. Well, the Allahabad court judgment, the best case that the power companies are expecting, and of course everyone hopes the judgment will come today. There is nothing that stops the court from saying no hearing listed, but there's no hearing left. They have to judge. If they give a judgment, the best that the industry is expecting is another 3-month wait. So, the same thing happens, but it will happen 3 months down the line. But let me tell you, nothing changes. No matter who loses, it goes to the Supreme Court. So it's not as if 3 months is a given. The RBI will definitely take it to the Supreme Court if the Allahabad court says 3 more months or whatever it says. If it doesn't, and it says no way for the power companies will go to Supreme Court. So really, it's not the end of the saga. The end of the saga is that out of 1.8 lakh crore power companies, looks like at best 1/3 will be saved.
Okay, and as it is, there is a Supreme Court hearing tomorrow to discuss whether the cases should be heard in Supreme Court and not Allahabad High Court as well. Yeah, no, actually that got done, and that's why the case continued in the Allahabad Court. But you're very right that the real important day for IBC comes tomorrow. They only removed the Allahabad Court case. Otherwise, there are some 11 cases challenging IBC and the February 12th circular. What the Supreme Court said is that we are consolidating all of that and we will start the hearing tomorrow, August 28th. So yet another chapter that challenges IBC will continue tomorrow. Okay, so important days lined up for the banks, power companies and a lot of these stress assets as well. But on that note, let's take a short break. We thank Lata and Ritu for joining us for that holistic approach to that particular February 12th circular. Welcome back. Well, HDFC has listed 2 of its subsidiaries in last 1 year, HDFC Standard Life and HDFC AMC. KK Mistry, the Vice Chairman and Chief Executive of HDFC, says that General Insurance Business and Education Finance arm will be the next in line to be listed in the next few years. CNBC TV-18's Nisha Poddar caught up with KK Mystery and started by asking on the utilization of funds recently raised by the company. Take a listen.
We use for a variety of purposes. Firstly, we need to keep putting capital into our various subsidiaries. HDFC Credila, we put in money. HDFC Credila is an education finance business. Then we said we would look at the health insurance business. Currently, there is nothing in sight. There is no company that we are looking at or talking to, but it's something which we have in mind. It would require capital. Whether it's organic or inorganic, it would require capital. So that's the second area of growth. Third is we talked about the stressed real estate business. So whilst it would be a fund structure, some percentage of the money in that fund will have to be put in by us to give confidence to ultimate investors. All of that will consume capital over a period of time.
So now what is the next stage of growth and value creation for the shareholders that you're looking at?
I talked briefly about HDFC Credila, saying we infused some capital into that business recently. We have HDFC Ergo, which is a foray into PNC insurance. At some point of time, over the next 3 to 5 years, we would certainly look at listing these companies. But we have to do it at the right time. It's not necessary that we have to do it to this year or next year. But when we believe the time is right in terms of getting sufficient size, then that is a time we would look at listing these businesses. But these are businesses which at some point of time could be listed.
So is it going to be two general insurance and health insurance separate? Is that the strategy or all rolled into one?
The ideal strategy would be that HDFC general, subject of course to regulatory requirements being complied with, that HDFC general insurance sets up a wholly owned subsidiary or carries out the health insurance business as a subsidiary of HDFC general insurance. That's the ideal strategy that we would like to look at, subject of course to it meeting regulatory.
Life insurance business. Now that's doing well. In fact, the stock has been performing very well as well. Now, what is the next stage in terms of strategy and growth for that company? And inorganic growth in that also is something to beef it up further?
We've done some inorganic growth in a general insurance business, where we bought over L&T general insurance a couple of years ago. But in the life business, we've never had inorganic growth, and despite that, we've had a stable growth. So our profit margins are good, and we would like to consistently keep growing and keep eyes open for any inorganic growth opportunity which exists.
Even in health insurance as well, you did look at Star Health. Now
Correct.
It's gone at 6,500 crore rupees. Having been in the insurance space now for a while, how do you measure the valuation expectations, these valuations?
Well, it's not for me to comment on why the Star Health valuation is 6,500 crores, but our valuation was lower and we put in a value at that price.
Well, there'll be a whole host of stocks that'll be in focus today on the back of earnings as well as brokerage notes. Sonal is here with that complete list. Hey Sonal, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Well, as you rightly said, some of the stocks will be in focus because of earnings. I'll start with Sundaram Finance, for which the net profit rose around 26% on a YOY basis, and the disbursement growth was also strong at around 19%, that came at 4,000 crore rupees. The other stock that will be in focus is LIC Housing Finance. Though the net profit and revenue growth was strong, net profit grew at around 19%, and the revenues also grew up by around 11%. Morgan Stanley has downgraded the stock to an equal weight from an overweight, and the target is at around 560 rupees per share. They think that the NPLs have doubled on a YOY basis, and that is why they've cut the FY 20 and 21 profit before tax estimates by 17 and 13% respectively. So that stock might see some pressure today. Some stocks will be in focus because of brokerage notes on them. Credit Suisse has written on Dr. Reddy's. They maintain their underperform call on the stock, and they think that the near-term risk for the company is from competition in a drug called metoprolol. It could impact the FY 19 EPS by around 6 to 7%, and the other upside that will be there for the company is from Suboxone, whose hearing is fixed on October 4th of 2019. So that is something we'll watch out for. Credit Suisse has also written on Sun Pharma. They maintain their outperform call on the stock. They expect news flow momentum to stay very strong for the company, and after the Halol resolution, they expect more approvals for the company. Back to you.
Okay, Sonal, thank you so much for getting us that list of stocks that have been focused. But keep your eyes out on the commodity markets because of a lot of moving parts there. And Manisha Gupta joins us to apprise us of what's happening in that space. Manisha, good morning. The crude is near the $76 per barrel mark again, and a lot of action in the currency space as well.
Oh, well, absolutely. You know, the strength in the commodities is back because the US dollar has declined, just about holding 95. Whatever the Fed chairperson spoke on the Friday has been well received in sense of speech. The markets are reading it positive. You will see interest rate hikes, but on a gradual pace. And you have seen the risk appetite actually come back. So euro has gained 1% in last couple of sessions. You have the Chinese yuan trading at a 1-month highs, and most of the commodity currencies are doing well as well. Even the gold prices are back above $1,200 per ounce. Even as the net shorts are at record highs, the physical buying in India is just about modest, especially with what's happened in Kerala. That is where you get 10% of the Indian annual demand coming from. We still are looking at some, paper buying coming for the gold prices. As you mentioned, crude also seems to be doing well. The only pain point for crude is the US and China trade dispute and the kind of impact that it can have on demand erosion. But otherwise, the US rig count has seen a decline. The Iran sanctions is something that would continue to support prices. And also the US inventories have been declining. So there are more supportive factors than bearish ones, especially on crude.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much for that, Manisha. Let's hop across to Mangalam. He's standing by. He's going to tell us all the cues coming in from the derivatives market. Hey, Mangalam, morning.
Morning, Nigel. So as we enter the expiry week, the cues, they're not so bad if you take a look at them as far as the F&O markets are concerned. And I say that primarily because, there was a lot of protection sought on the downside as well as some caution, which is not always a bad thing. So the FIs, they've sold about 47 crores in index futures, still long about 51% in index futures. So that is some interesting thing that we will be watching out for towards the end of this week as we enter the expiry week itself. In index options, now there was a net sale of just about 3 crores, but that was primarily on account of the fact that there was an equal number of put buying and call selling to the tune of around 2,800 contracts by the FIIs. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. The put call ratio, which was at heady levels of 1.8, has fallen to about 1.63 from 1.73, so that is a good thing. Add to that, we have 11,500 put. That continues to see some writing, but on Friday's trading session, we saw some shedding of open interest out there. The 11,600 call saw some writing, so that will be interesting given the SGX Nifty indicating, we will open above that 11,600 mark. We saw Jet Airways and Hexaware move on Friday. They've entered the F&O band, so those are a couple of stocks that we'll be watching out for, especially all through the course of this week.
Okay, Mangalam, thank you so much for that. So the cues from the F&O space don't look very bad as we start this expiry week. But on that note, we'll wrap up on this edition of Power Breakfast. From the team and myself, thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call comes up next.